At 2:17 a.m. on a moonless spring night, a single, jagged scream pierced the stillness. Neighbors seldom heard anything from the old McAllister house on Renwood Lane, tucked into the quiet suburbs east of Riverton Creek. But that night, something monstrous was taking place. Moments later, all that remained was silence, and a phone call to Riverton's 911 dispatch that would mark the beginning of a nightmare. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories. So the caller was breathless, trembling. "Please hurry. There's been an assault. Someone is here." I don't know who it is." Then the line went dead. When officers arrived, the foyer light was on. The front door was unlocked. Inside, they found blood, but no body. It would be months before they grasped that this was no random intruder, no botched home invasion. This was the work of someone infinitely calculating and terrifyingly patient. Riverton Creek was, by most accounts, unremarkable. A mid-sized city of 150,000 people, with a modest downtown, tree-lined streets, and a river that cut through it hard. To outsiders, it felt like an ordinary American town, quiet, safe, predictable. That silence made what followed all the more shocking. The McAllister household, residents of Dr. Colin McAllister, age 48, and his wife, Marianne, age 45, sat on a quiet crescent near the local high school. Colin was a respected cardiologist at Riverton General Hospital, known for his steady competence and philanthropy. Marianne taught French at the local community college, adored by students for her warmth and encouragement. Their son, James, 17, was away at a summer math camp when the horror struck. He'd been the only other occupant of the house, but he was out of state and had no idea what fate awaited his parents. Colin and Marianne were well-liked. They held fundraisers for local arts programs, hosted dinners, and volunteered in refugee resettlement efforts. Rumors swirled that Marianne was adopting a child from abroad. Nothing was confirmed. The McAllisters had a veneer of normalcy, which is precisely what made them vulnerable. In the days before the attack, neighbors recalled seeing a van parked twice late at night in front of the house, an unfamiliar white cargo van with no markings. It was never noted in reports because no one could imagine the van was linked to something so vile. On that night, the only clue left behind the foyer was a single footprint in blood, smeared but distinct, a European-sized 43 boot, Vibram-like sole, and a single drop of Marianne's blood on the door handle. But where were the bodies? Whoever did this had vanished, or taken them elsewhere. When the police broke through the foyer into the rest of the house, they were met with a shocking emptiness. The living room's couches were splattered with red, cushions torn, throw pillows flung aside. On the cherry wood dining table lay a French edition of a poetry book, Marianne's favorite, open to a page spattered in crimson. On the kitchen floor, a smudge trail led from the sink to the hallway. The wallpaper in the guest bathroom had been slashed, as if to mask signs of forced entry. But the master bedroom was pristine, a strange juxtaposition. The bed made, sheets unrumpled, robes folded on the chair. No struggle, no sign of violence. That was the first unreal moment. There was no pool of blood in the bedroom, no broken pieces of furniture. It was as if whoever took her chose that room carefully, or avoided it entirely. In a drawer of Marianne's bedside table, they found a note in French. La lumière cédient, mais l'ombre persiste. Translation: the light fades, but the shadow persists. The note was on high-quality stationery from a boutique in Paris. Marianne had no known reason to have stationery from Paris. Was this gift or threat? It was clear to investigators. The McAllisters had been targeted. This was no burglary gone wrong. This was something else. Investigators scoured the house. Under the sink, a scrap of fabric. Thin, black, synthetic, possibly from a glove. In the garage, tire tracks in the gravel showed a van pulled close to the back, doors ajar. But no van, no fingerprints beyond the blood footprint, no DNA aside from the victims. No witness saw anyone entering or leaving. Even the neighbor's security cameras faced the street and had blacked out footage that night, malfunctioning at the exact hour. The pressure came swiftly from public and press. The mayor called a special task force. Riverton PD homicide teamed with the State Bureau. Soon the case was on the front page of every local paper, and faint whispers circulated that this might be the work of a serial predator. Phase 1. The immediate leads. From the beginning, the investigation felt one step behind. That lone footprint suggested deliberate planning. Investigators canvassed local shoe retailers, plate and pattern numbers, even boot importers. They ran a database check of convicted criminals with size 43 footprints, including violent offenders and bootleggers. But nothing matched. They checked Marianne's background. Did she travel to France? Did she have enemies? Any connections to Paris? They found she had visited Paris 7 years earlier for a faculty exchange program. She still corresponded with a few French colleagues. But nothing flagged immediate danger. No threats, no dispute, no breakups. Investigators also explored Colin's life. As a cardiologist, he made powerful enemies, medical board politics, malpractice threats, jealous colleagues. But none surfaced with enough motive or access to plan something like this. His schedule on that week was standard. Bank records didn't show incoming large payments. And fingerprints in his office, at the hospital, all seemed routine. The white van sightings remained mysterious. The plate was never recorded. The time, around 1:30 a.m., and again at 3:20 a.m., neighbors said, coincided awkwardly with the time window of the attack. The van's make and model, as recalled, was generic, something investigators saw as a red herring, too vague to latch onto anything. In parallel, the forensic team processed every inch of the McAllister house for trace evidence. Fibers, hairs, DNA, soil. They found a few promising leads. A peculiar fiber, ultrafine Kevlar blend thread, caught near a door hinge. That material was unusual in residential gloves. A partial soil sample not native to McAllister Yard, but matching a gravel patch near an industrial complex on the town outskirts. A minute speck of metallic residue on the French note, possibly from a fine-tipped fountain pen, but none connected to a suspect. No match in databases. Phase 2. Suspects in red herring suspect A. Dr. Nigel Sampson. Dr. Nigel Sampson was a cardiac surgeon on staff at the same hospital as Colin. He and Colin had competed for departmental leadership positions. Rumor had it Nigel had accused Colin of taking credit for his research. Sampson had no direct alibi for the night. Official records showed he left the hospital late after rounds, then had no timestamp until early morning, when he was recorded entering his home 4 miles away. His house was searched. His glove collection included high-end tactical winter gloves, but no gloves matching the Kevlar fiber. He accounted for his whereabouts via a maid's testimony and dinner receipts. No blood, no trace evidence. Sampson denied any involvement. His rivalry with Colin was real, but motive seemed too superficial. Suspect B, Isabelle Roche. Isabelle Roche was a French lecturer Marianne had met during her exchange program. Investigators traced her to Lyon, France. She had a letter from Marianne about a year ago, discussing potential future cooperation on a research project. Isabelle's responses grew cold later. The correspondence dwindled. Some emails hinted at tension over credit. But is that sufficient to fly someone across the Atlantic? They found no evidence Isabelle had traveled to the U.S. in recent years. A dead end. Suspect C, the van driver. An attempt to trace the white van involved local garages and surveillance footage from neighboring towns. One lead, an overhaul invoice for a white 2008 Mercedes Sprinter van, recorded 3 months earlier at a small shop 10 miles outside Riverton. The van was sold later that week to an anonymous buyer, cash transaction. The shopkeeper recalled the buyer wore gloves, didn't give a name, had European accent. They never got plates or an ID. Investigators traced the van route via satellite imagery at night. Some municipal cameras. They identified one suspicious movement. The van turned off near an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts, then re-entered the highway. But no cameras in the warehouse yard. The lead stalled. Suspect D, a local ex-con, Jared Wynn. Jared Wynn, 31, was a parolee convicted for violent theft 6 years earlier. He resided in a trailer 2 towns over. He denied involvement, but had showed up in the McAllister neighborhood late one night weeks before the attack, according to neighbor recollection. His DNA was run against all trace evidence. No match. He claimed he was driving past. Without supporting evidence, he was dismissed from serious suspicion. Throughout all this, investigators hit walls. Every promising lead collapsed. The press began to call the assailant the shadow drifter. The public was terrified because the killer had struck in suburbia, inside a home owned by pillars of the community, and had vanished without a trace. Mary Ann McAllister, heart and secret. Mary Ann was gentle, meticulous, a lover of literature and classical music. To her students, she was a guide and confidant. To her husband, she was comfort and anchor. To the world, quiet and unassuming. But under that surface lay a small storm. Unbeknownst to most, Mary Ann had been quietly investigating something she stumbled upon 6 months prior. She discovered, through a refugee assistance program she volunteered with, a suspicious ring of human trafficking operating, partially masked by legitimate aid organizations. She had quietly shared some concerns with the police, pressed for confidentiality, and forwarded documents to a few acquaintances in D.C. She also received encryption-protected emails, some threatening. Once she found a card slipped under a car windshield. Tu sais trop. Tu pays. You know too much. You will pay. She dismissed it as scare mail, but she hid it in her desk, in her private journal. She made the note, "I feel watched." Could her humanitarian work have marked her? Might she have discovered someone's secret too dangerous? This revelation turned the McAllister couple from symbolic victims to potential whistleblowers. That complexity gave motive. Dr. Colin McAllister, rational, but flawed. Colin was analytical, calm, scientific. He compartmentalized emotions. In the months before, he appeared preoccupied. Hospital board politics, acts of professional rivalry. It seemed he was guarding secrets, too. Some colleagues noted he'd ripped up a letter one day, abruptly left a staff meeting. In private, he worried about Mary Ann's safety, especially after she'd shared her concerns with him about that aid group. He insisted on no publicity. "We have to be careful," he told her. His distance made their emotional support weak. Yet, he was fiercely protective. The night of the attack, had he been trying to intercept an intruder? Or had he been elsewhere entirely? Investigators, tension, obsession, and doubt led Detective Maria Vasquez was assigned the case. A seasoned homicide detective with a granite resolve, but also a rarely shown empathy. She had grown up in a rough city, had lost friends to crime, and she believed the job was her calling. But this case shook her. Every dead end frustrated her. Every error stung. At night, she would lie awake, turning minute details over. The spotty tire tracks, the French note, the imported stationery. She blamed herself when leads dried up. Her partner, young Detective Omar Espinoza, was idealistic, bright, full of energy, but at times too eager. He pushed jumping to conclusions. Maria would quiet him. "We don't know yet. Wait for the proof." The local community, meanwhile, oscillated between fear and suspicion. In coffee shops, whispers. Who would do this? Churches held prayer vigils. School boards canceled evening programs out of safety concerns. Parents warned kids not to jog after dark. The social fabric quivered. The second break-in. 6 weeks into the investigation, another house on the same crescent was burglarized. Door force, electronics stolen, but no one home. That overnight, a Latin edition of a poem book sat on the floor. Stolen from McAllister's shelves, missing now. The intruder intentionally took from McAllister household items. Investigators realized this was trophy hunting, a psychological taunt. At that scene, they recovered a second, faint footprint, also European 43, but slight differences in wear pattern. They gathered that the same boots had been reused. They also found a microSD card tucked in the floor molding. The intruder had dropped it accidentally. It contained images, low-resolution thumbnails of rooms in McAllister house, blueprints, cabinets, doorways. Someone had done reconnaissance. Led Detective Vasquez rechecked all suspects. Who could have had such planning? The forensic team enhanced images. On one, a corner of a fireplace mantle in the McAllister home was visible. They overlaid the pattern and confirmed it matched. proof the thief had surveyed their home before. The investigation pivoted. This was not a crime of passion. It was long in the making. Anonymous letters arrive. Shortly after, the McAllister home received a package, an envelope, no return address, containing an audio CD. On it, a single warped voice said, in clipped English with a French accent, "You dig too deep. You will hear no more from me. But I hear from you." Investigators listened. Faint background noise sounded like trickling water, a breeze, a squeak of wooden floor. It was untraceable. A note accompanied it. "Ne cherchez pas dans l'ombre. Do not search in shadow." Investigators suspected taunting from the perpetrator. Authorities increased surveillance around the McAllister block, offered a $100,000 reward. Public tip lines opened. Thousands of calls poured in, but nearly all were false leads or noise. One tip. A former aide to a local congressman claimed she'd overheard office chatter. "We should warn them that some secrets are too deadly." The aide would not elaborate, but she claimed that Marianne had been close to exposing a dark funding link in the aid organization. The philanthropic world was suddenly suspect. A chilling confession, or so it seems. Then came a letter, postmarked from another state, from someone calling themselves Lou Corbeau, the Crow. The 4-page typed confession claimed responsibility. "I visited McAllister's to extract what Marianne leaked. I confronted them. Things escalated. It was an accident." It pleaded, "I did it for justice, for truth, but now the burden kills me." The letter included details only the perpetrator could know. Blood in the foyer, placement of the poetry book, the stolen French stationery. Investigators were torn. Should they treat it as genuine or as a clever hoax? Maria Vasquez requested forensic work, ink composition analysis, paper source, postmark trace. The letter paper dated from a rare stationery line, but no fingerprints. The postmark traced to a P.O. box in Albany, New York. But the letter had passed through several intermediate postal facilities, concealing the sender. Investigators traced the stationery manufacturer, the same boutique in Paris where the French note was printed. The company confirmed they had sold a shipment to a U.S. distributor 6 months earlier, but the records anonymized buyers. Nothing led to a suspect. Meanwhile, tension brewed between Vasquez and Espinoza. Espinoza wanted to charge Sampson on motive alone. Vasquez refused. That's what plays do in Pulp Fiction. We need evidence. Their friction grew. Press reporters leaked that the department was divided. 9 months in, with no arrests, the public fear deepened. The McAllister house remained vacant, but under constant guard. James McAllister, the son, returned home after hearing of the new break-in and the CD. Emotionally shattered, he pleaded for answers, but his grief was cloaked in determination. He raised private funds, hired independent security consultants. One of those consultants, ex-FBI analyst Claire Hamish, re-examined all case materials. She proposed an audacious hypothesis that the killer was someone within Marianne's humanitarian network, someone who moved freely between nations, someone capable of slipping international lines. Claire requested all diplomatic and refugee assistance records. She dug into Marianne's emails, her encrypted messages, her donors, her overseas correspondence. She flagged one name, Lucien Moreau, a fixer and logistics manager who had worked with NGOs in West Africa and also run side contracts, some legitimate, some shady. He had French connections, spoke multiple languages, and little oversight. Moreau had once visited Riverton during a project evaluation a few years earlier. He had access to high-end gloves, had traveled frequently between Africa and Europe, and was known to disappear for weeks. He had connections in Paris. He was wealthy, secretive, and shady. But was he enough? Claire argued. A serial killer with planning like this would need resources, mobility, anonymity, but also knowledge of Marianne's clandestine work. Moreau's profile fit. He also had unconfirmed rumors of involvement in money laundering, arms brokering. Could he mask a darker side? Investigators reopened lines of inquiry into Moreau. They found that he had abandoned an apartment in Lyon under a sudden pretext. They discovered a front company registered in New York under a shell name, its address tied to a UPS box. They tracked a wire transfer from that company to a van dealership in Ohio months before the attack, the same period when the white van was purchased. Surveillance on that UPS box found correspondence between Morrow and unknown parties, encrypted messages. Still, there was no direct proof. No DNA, no fingerprints, no photograph tying Morrow to the McAllister crime. If he was a killer, he had covered all tracks meticulously. Then a breakthrough. The forensic team re-examined the Kevlar-threaded glove fiber. They traced unusual microfibers within it, a rare polymer blend produced by a German technical factory that supplied elite tactical gear to some NGO and military outfits. The lab located only 2 distributors in the U.S., one used by humanitarian organizations, the other by private security firms. That narrowed the pool. Morrow's front companies had indeed purchased some of that material for protective gear shipments. Claire's theory now had traction, but the defense mounted swiftly. Such materials were not exclusive. Many agencies and security firms used them, so it was circumstantial, but heavy in pattern. The case began to look like a net closing, but still no convict. Then came the moment that cracked every assumption. One night, security cameras around McAllister House recorded a faint silhouette leaving the property. Around 3:22 a.m., the figure resembled a man, tall, lean, purposeful stride. The footage was grainy but compelling. Vasquez and Espinoza poured over it. The outline of a Sprinter-style van appeared shortly after. The van moved slowly, then accelerated away. Inside that footage, a flash of something. A reflective strip, momentary glint. Could it be a buckle? Perhaps glove clasp? Investigators enhanced the video with AI filters. They traced the van's path out of the neighborhood, onto side roads, and eventually toward the hospital district. Why the hospital? The next morning, security guards in a hospital basement noticed a white van parked near a rarely used loading dock. But it wasn't there at first light. By the time the police arrived, it had gone. They searched for residual prints, tire treads, DNA, nothing. But in the loading bay on the concrete floor under UV light, a faint smudge showed 2 letters, L and M. In yellow-tinged dust. Could be nothing, or could be Lucien Moreau. With that clue, Vasquez got a warrant to search Moreau's shell company office in New York. They found records of invoices for van parts, glove orders, suspicious travel logs. They also uncovered a bank account in Zurich that had received a large amount of cash 6 weeks prior to McAllister attack. Suspicious timing. They traced that account to offshore laundering concerns. But still, no body. The central question remained. Where were McAllisters? Had they been killed? Were they held somewhere? No remains were ever found. By the end of Part 1, the case is primed for confrontation. Investigators have built a web of circumstantial evidence around Lucien Moreau, his ties to Marianne's NGO work, his purchase of rare tactical gloves, his potential van purchase via shell companies, the letters signed Le Corbeau, the initials LM at the dock, but they cannot yet place him at the McAllister house or connect him to the physical evidence beyond shadowy semblances. Public pressure crescendos. The town remains tense. The families of earlier suspects protest. The hospital staff whispers. The aid organization Marianne worked for issue statements, some deflecting blame, others insisting on transparency. Meanwhile, a private forensic lab retained by the McAllister family alerts Detective Vasquez. They found a faint trace of a rare isotope on the French note. That isotope is only employed in certain high-end ink pigments shipped through an exclusive European distributor, one with clientele overlapping Moreau's known contacts. It does not convict, but it sharpens the suspicion. And then comes a final twist. A partial DNA match surfaces in an obscure international database, matching one tiny stripe of DNA from a glove fiber to a person living abroad with alias records connected to Moreau's network. The match is not perfect. It's fragmentary, probabilistic, but enough to warrant action. At that moment, the police prepare to move in on Moreau's current known address in Zurich. They coordinate with Swiss authorities. They prepare indictments. But as Hand is prepared to issue the arrest warrant, they receive a brief, chilling encrypted email on a channel known only to Vasquez, from Le Corbeau. You were close, but I always leave doors open. Meet me at midnight, Wrenwood Lane, if you dare. Was this a trap? Is the killer luring them? Is Morrow the real killer, or another puppet master? Will the investigators take the bait? The midnight hour approaches. In the darkness, shadows lengthen. A van with tinted windows idles near Wrenwood Lane. No sirens. No uniformed police. And a figure steps into a street lamp's weak glow, one the world will soon know, if any proof is ever found. It was 11:54 p.m. when Detective Maria Vasquez parked her unmarked sedan a block from Wrenwood Lane. The sky was bruised black and purple, wind slicing through the trees like whispers. Every porch light on the street had been turned off, as if the neighborhood itself was holding its breath. The only illumination came from the sodium glow of a single flickering street lamp, where the killer's message said to meet. Inside the car, Vasquez's pulse drummed against her ribs. The email had arrived just 3 hours earlier. Meet me at midnight, Wrenwood Lane, if you dare. The audacity of it was breathtaking. He knew she couldn't resist. Omar Espinosa's voice crackled through her earpiece. You're sure you want going alone? I started this, she whispered, eyes fixed on the shadow at the far end of the lane. I'll end it. There was a pause. Backup's 2 minutes out. If it's him, don't let him talk you into anything. But she already knew. This man didn't talk people into things. He designed them. Every step, every fear, every heartbeat. He choreographed chaos like a symphony. And tonight, she was walking into his masterpiece. At exactly 12 a.m., the van's headlights blinked twice, once twice, and then went dark. Vasquez took a step forward, one hand on her holster, the other gripping her flashlight. Lucien Moreau, she called into the dark. This is Detective Maria Vasquez, Riverton PD. Step out of the vehicle. Hands where I can see them. Silence. Then the driver's door creaked open. A tall man emerged, dressed in black from head to toe. His face was partly obscured by the glow of the flickering lamp, but she caught glimpses. Silvering hair, angular jaw, calm posture. You've been chasing ghosts, he said. His voice was low, accented, disturbingly calm. You think I killed them. You think I kill anyone. You wrote the letters. You bought the van. You were at the McAllister's house. He tilted his head, almost smiling. You think too small. There's no them in me. There's a pattern. You haven't seen it yet. Her heart hammered. Where are Colin and Marian McAllister? His expression didn't change. You still believe they're dead? She froze. What? He stepped closer, unarmed. You assume a disappearance equals a death. But what if the dead are alive and the living are ghosts? For a split second, she faltered. Every instinct screamed trap. But his calm was magnetic, terrifyingly convincing. Then, without warning, headlights flooded the lane, Espinosa's car screeching around the corner. The man didn't even flinch. You shouldn't have brought friends, he murmured. You've just broken the pattern. In that instant, the van behind him erupted in flame, a controlled detonation. The blast hurled Vasquez backward, smoke swallowing the street in chaos. By the time she scrambled to her feet, coughing, the man was gone. Only the van's remains hissed in the firelight, and a small silver flash drive melted halfway into the asphalt. The drive was partially destroyed, but Riverton's cyber unit managed to recover fragments. Inside were encrypted text files, part of a manifesto, part of confession, part of something else entirely. The fragments read, Riverton was not the beginning. It was rehearsal. They hide among you, those who pay for purity with blood. The light fades, but the shadow persists. The last line matched the French note found in Marianne's bedside drawer. Vasquez's stomach turned as she scrolled through each recovered byte. Intermixed with the words were coordinates, sets of GPS locations scattered across the U.S. and Europe. Some pointed to known crime scenes of unsolved abductions spanning 15 years. Disappearances of doctors, journalists, activists, people who had dug into corruption, trafficking, or medical ethics. It wasn't one murder. It was a network. The task force assembled the next morning in a haze of disbelief. If these coordinates are real, said FBI liaison agent Hollins, we're looking at least 9 cold cases connected by one hand or one organization. Vasquez sat silent, scanning the wall of photos they'd pinned up. Faces of victims, maps, newspaper clippings. It looked like chaos. But to her, something subtle aligned. Every victim had touched some humanitarian, medical, or legal field connected to global aid funding. Lucia Morrow wasn't a random psychopath. He was a precision tool of a shadow system. Espinoza clicked open one photo, a crime scene in New Jersey from 2014. The victim, Dr. Elise Fournier, an aid logistics director, vanished after uncovering fraud in overseas shipments. Her home bore the same French inscription on a note card. Another case from Lisbon, Portugal, 2017. Journalist shot execution style. Note in French under his desk blotter. Same phrase. The connections were undeniable. This is systemic, Vasquez said. He's not killing for pleasure. He's cleaning house. Hollins frowned. Then who's the client? That was the question none of them wanted to say aloud. Weeks passed. Morrow vanished. Interpol issued red notices, but he stayed one step ahead. Each lead dissolved into misdirection. False passports, burner phones, cash trails to offshore banks. Then, in late October, an anonymous courier delivered a sealed box to the Riverton precinct. Inside, a manila folder, a stack of Polaroids, and a single type sheet. The photographs were chilling, grainy surveillance images of Marianne and Colin McAllister, alive, sitting in what looked like a dim industrial room. Their eyes were open. A clock behind them showed a time, 6:13 p.m. The date, 2 weeks earlier. The type sheet said, "They are not dead. Yet, you have 91 days to understand why they had to disappear. Follow the ink. LC. LC, this wasn't Le Corbeau. It was new. A partner? A successor?" Vasquez immediately scanned the photos. The shadows, the light sources, the clock, all clues. The clock model was German-made, used in industrial plants across Eastern Europe. The wall paint was dull green, consistent with Cold War-era factories. Somewhere repurposed, Espinoza said. Maybe a warehouse, maybe an old research facility. Follow the ink, Vasquez muttered. The ink from the letters. That clue gnawed at her. She ordered a cross-check on shipments of the rare isotope-based pigment found in the French note. Results came back. The isotope ink was exported primarily to 3 clients, 2 in France, 1 in the United States. The U.S. client was a subsidiary of a pharmaceutical firm called Genovarix Labs. A shock rippled through the task force. Genovarix was one of the same donors behind the aid group Marianne had been investigating. Genovarix was a name hidden in plain sight, funding clinics in war-torn zones, supplying vaccines, sponsoring refugee medicine programs. But deeper audits revealed questionable contracts, shell donations, and missing shipments. The McAllisters' emails hinted that Marianne had suspected the company of using humanitarian aid as a cover for illegal human trials. Suddenly, the motive was brutally clear. She had discovered something catastrophic. A raid on Genovarix's local data office revealed partial evidence. Erased hard drives, shredded files, but one surviving memo titled Project Lysandra. The memo mentioned Lucia Morrow by codename, Consultant, External Containment and Recovery. Containment. Recovery. He wasn't just an assassin. He was the cleaner, the kind who erased problems and the people who discovered them. But why leave clues now? Why contact Vasquez directly? Was he taunting her or warning her? With the recovered coordinates, Interpol traced Morrow's possible base of operations to Zurich. A warehouse in the industrial district matched one of the GPS points. Surveillance confirmed sporadic activity. Unknown individuals loading crates at night. On December 3rd, an international task force moved in. Vasquez was flown in under FBI liaison authority. The raid was surgical. They breached the warehouse at 2 a.m. Inside, silence, dust, rows of empty cages and medical tables. A faint smell of disinfectant and steel. At the far end, a projector flickered to life. On the wall appeared a live video feed. Lucia Morrow, seated in a dark room, staring directly into the lens. "Welcome to the end of the maze," he said. "Or perhaps the beginning." Vasquez gripped her radio. "Trace this feed. Now." "We're trying," came the static reply. No signal origin. It's looping through satellite relays. Moreau continued, his voice calm, almost kind. You were right, detective. I didn't act alone. I never do. I was the architect, not the builder. Every disappearance, every clue. It was to teach you how deep the rot goes. He leaned closer to the camera. But you can't stop what's already in motion. The McAllisters are leveraged, not victims. They're being used by silence. Vasquez shouted at the screen. Where are they? He smiled faintly. Closer than you think. The screen went black. Then, from somewhere in a warehouse, a low mechanical hum began, like generators coming online. Espinosa and the agents fanned out. Behind a sealed door at the rear, they found a narrow corridor leading underground. At the end, a steel chamber with 2 chairs bolted to the floor. 2 people sat in those chairs, bound, blindfolded, breathing. Marianne and Colin McAllister. They were alive. They were rushed to Zurich University Hospital under police protection. Both were dehydrated, weak, but conscious. It took days before Marianne could speak. When she did, her first words were, "He's not finished." In fragmented accounts, she described how they had been abducted, not murdered, because she held files on Jenna Varks's covert drug trials. Moreau had interrogated them, not for information, but for silence. Then someone else, the woman with the black gloves, took over. A woman? Marianne's description was precise. Late 30s, pale skin, sharp accent, not French, possibly Eastern European. He called her Leora. She said she was the real architect now. The name Leora C. matched the initials from a new note, LC. She wasn't his partner. She was his replacement. 3 days after the McAllisters' rescue, Swiss authorities discovered that Lucien Moreau's bank accounts had been emptied, his properties sold. He had vanished again, only this time, without a trace of electronic activity. But someone else was still moving the chess pieces. Interpol intercepted a package addressed to Vasquez's home in Riverton. Inside was a small black notebook embossed with a silver crow. The first page contained a single handwritten line. You saved the wrong people. The rest of the pages were filled with coordinates, notes in both English and Cyrillic, and diagrams of molecules, Jenna Varks's drug formulas. Whoever sent it wanted her to see what came next. That same week, 2 former Jenna Varks board members were found dead in apparent suicides, both within hours of each other. One in Geneva, one in Virginia. Each left a note signed Elsie. The media exploded. Conspiracy theories ran wild. The phrase shadow network appeared in headlines worldwide. Vasquez, sleepless and shaken, realized a horrifying truth. Moreau hadn't failed his mission. He'd simply passed the torch. Weeks later, on New Year's Eve, as Riverton prepared fireworks, Vasquez sat alone in her apartment, reviewing McAllister files one last time. The wind howled outside. Her laptop pinged. An incoming secure message. No address, no sender. Just one attachment. A video file titled Aftermath_001. She hesitated, then played it. Static. Then, the face of Lucien Moreau filled the screen, lit by candlelight. I told you the pattern was bigger than me, he said. I told you the living can become ghosts. He paused, eyes burning through the camera. Leora was never my creation. She was theirs. You've only cut one string of the web. But now, detective, they know your name. The video glitched. His final words bled through distortion. When the next light fades, look behind you. The screen went black. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. One new message. Happy New Year, Maria. LC. Vasquez froze. Outside, fireworks burst above Riverton, painting the sky red and gold. And in the reflection of her window, for just a moment, she thought she saw movement. A woman's silhouette on the street below, watching her apartment, wearing black gloves. The fireworks drowned out the sound of her heartbeat. By 2019, the story of the Cypher killer had become something of an urban legend, whispered on podcasts, dissected in Reddit threads, and resurrected every Halloween in crime forums. But for the detectives who had lived the nightmare, it was no ghost story. It was unfinished business. Detective Raymond Keller, once a lead investigator on the case before his forced early retirement, spent his evenings poring over digitized case files from his cluttered garage in upstate New York. He was 72, half-deaf, arthritic, and bitterly obsessed. The Bureau had moved on long ago, but Keller couldn't. Not when the killer had never been caught. He clicked open a folder labeled Cipher Crosslink, Phase 3. On the screen glowed a symbol, 3 concentric circles intersected by a triangle, the same symbol carved into every victim's wrist. He'd seen it too many times to count, yet tonight, something felt different. The metadata on the file showed it had been modified. 3 days ago, Keller froze. His desktop was offline. He unplugged his router years ago. Then the cursor began to move. On its own, words appeared across the screen, letter by letter. Hello, Raymond. Still chasing ghosts. It had been nearly 22 years since the last confirmed cipher killing. The victims, 12 across 4 states, had all been found with the same chilling signature, a carved geometric mark, and a coded note referencing prime numbers, psychological experiments, and guilt. For decades, no one had deciphered the full meaning behind the killer's cryptic notes. Every theory, from religious fanaticism to military programming, led nowhere. But Keller had always believed the cipher killer wasn't one person. He theorized it was a network, a closed society of intellectuals playing God with human lives. When he brought this up to the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit back in 2002, they laughed him out of the room. "You're chasing conspiracies, Ray," his supervisor had told him. Now, after 20 years of silence, the killer, or someone pretending to be him, had found a way to reach into Keller's digital graveyard. He printed the screen capture, circled the timestamp, and began calling his former contacts. Most didn't pick up. The few who did hung up after hearing the words cipher killer. Then, a voicemail came through that same night from a restricted number. Detective Keller, if you want to know who I am, look inside your file cabinet. Bottom drawer. The line went dead. Keller limped toward the old filing cabinet by his workbench. It was dusty, locked, forgotten. He broke the latch with a screwdriver and pulled it open. Inside, beneath stacks of moldy manila folders, lay a small black envelope. He didn't remember ever putting it there. Inside the envelope, a flash drive. The drive contained one file. No name, no format. Just 001110110101. When open, it displayed coordinates. A location deep in northern Pennsylvania, near the edge of an abandoned research facility. Keller printed a map. He stared at it for a long moment before calling a woman whose number he hadn't dialed in years. "Agent Monroe," he said when she answered. The voice on the other end was sharp, cautious. "Detective Keller, I thought you were done with this." "So did I," he said, "but he's back." Silence. Then, the sound of her exhale. "I'll meet you there." They met 2 days later near a fenced compound swallowed by trees. The sign at the gate read Minelab Research Group. Closed since 1998. Agent Laura Monroe, now in her mid-40s, looked different from the ambitious young profiler Keller remembered. Her eyes were sharper, her expression colder, the kind that came from years of living inside other people's darkness. As they walked through the rusted entrance, the wind carried the metallic scent of rain. Keller's flashlight caught peeling white tiles, old lab tables, and shattered glass. "This is where the experiments were conducted," Monroe said. "Behavioral conditioning, trauma response, cryptographic memory studies. The Bureau classified most of it after '98. Keller nodded. "You think the killer worked here?" "I think," she said slowly, "the killer was created here." They entered the main lab chamber, the air heavy with mold and silence. On the wall, faint but visible beneath decades of grime, was the same symbol from the murders. 3 circles and a triangle. Beneath it, written in faded marker, the test never ended. They unearthed hundreds of documents from a hidden drawer, experimental logs dated between 1994 and 1998. Each page bore initials of participants, subject A01 through A20. Next to each, the words Cognitive Response/Moral Collapse Study. Keller scanned through them until he found a line that made his blood run cold. A07, Anomalous Response, Escape Termination Phase. Subject demonstrated superior pattern cognition and emotional detachment. Classified, Project Cypher. Escape termination phase, Monroe murmured. Meaning, he got out, Keller finished. Subject A07 wasn't a killer by nature. He was made into one, conditioned through experiments in guilt, empathy suppression, and problem solving. He was part of an off-the-book study on moral desensitization. Keller realized what the killer's notes meant now. The numbers, the riddles, the geometric codes. Each murder had been a continuation of the experiment. A07 had taken the lessons of his captivity and turned the world into his new lab. They cross-referenced personnel rosters from MindLab with the earliest known Cypher victim, a graduate student who once interned at the facility. Her name was Leah Forrester. Her supervisor? Dr. Julian Cross, a neuroscientist who vanished in 1998, 2 months before facilities shut down. Cross, Keller said, flipping to the printouts. He fits everything: age, intelligence, access, motive. But Monroe shook her head. No, Dr. Cross was confirmed dead in a car crash, burned beyond recognition. Confirmed by who? Keller asked quietly. Monroe paused. The lab's own internal security team. That night, Keller returned to his motel and logged into an old bureau database using an expired credential. He searched the name Julian Cross. No results. Then he searched A07. The system froze for a moment before displaying a line of text across the screen. Welcome back, Doctor. His heart stopped. A webcam indicator on his laptop blinked red, then green. Someone was watching him. On the screen, a live video feed appeared. The camera from his own laptop. In the reflection, he saw himself and someone standing behind him. He spun around, but the room was empty. When he looked back, the video feed had changed. It now showed another location, Agent Monroe's motel room. She was on the phone, unaware that her camera was live. Keller shouted her name, but of course, she couldn't hear him. Then a line of text appeared beneath the video. Do not warn her. The test continues. Monroe didn't show up the next morning. Her room door was ajar. Her phone shattered on the floor. On the mirror above the sink was the symbol drawn in her own lipstick. Inside the sink, a single USB drive labeled Final Phase. Keller inserted it into his laptop, hands trembling. The drive contained hundreds of photos, all taken within the last 2 years. Victims Keller didn't recognize. Each image tagged with GPS data. The most recent was time-stamped 1 week ago. Location: downtown Pittsburgh. The photo showed a woman's body lying in a church confessional. On her wrist, the familiar carved symbol, and beside her body, a note addressed to Keller himself. Raymond, if intelligence is a measure of God, then morality is the flaw that keeps man from ascending. You taught me that. It was signed A07. Keller's mind reeled. He had never met A07, or so he thought. But then, in the pile of MindLab documents, he saw his own signature. Subject evaluation: Julian Cross/A07. Evaluator: Raymond Keller, Ph.D. He wasn't just the investigator. He was part of the creation. Before joining law enforcement, Keller had been consultant on moral cognition for the MindLab project. Decades ago, a footnote in his long-forgotten academic career, he had helped design the moral collapse scenarios that broke A07's mind. Now, the killer had come full circle, turning his teacher into the final test. He drove to Pittsburgh alone. The coordinates led to an abandoned cathedral near the river. Inside, candlelight flickered against stained glass. At the altar stood a figure, tall, composed, wearing a gray coat. Keller's voice echoed, Julian Cross. The man turned slowly. His hair was silver now, his eyes a pale, glacial blue. I wonder how long it would take you, Cross said softly. You taught me guilt. You taught me empathy. You showed me how fragile morality is when pressed by logic. And then you buried me. You killed innocent people, Keller snapped. I completed your experiment, Cross replied. I took it to its conclusion. I proved that intellect, unbound by emotion, achieves perfection. The Bureau called me a monster. You call me a project. Keller raised his gun. It ends tonight. Cross smiled faintly. No, Raymond, it ends when you understand. He dropped a folder onto the pew. Inside were photos, Keller's own handwriting on early conditioning reports, his notes recommending prolonged isolation and empathy deprivation. Cross stepped closer. You built me. You built this. I simply lived the logic you wrote. Keller's hands trembled. Why me now? Because, Cross said, the final test is confession. Then the lights went out. When police arrived at the cathedral 2 hours later, they found no bodies, only a tape recorder resting on the altar. The tape contained Keller's voice. He was right. It was never about the murders. It was about the question, what happens when intellect evolves past morality? If anyone hears this, understand that evil doesn't always hide in rage or madness. Sometimes it hides in reason. The tape ended with static. Neither Keller nor Cross were ever found. In 2022, a graduate student at MIT named Elena Marks uploaded a new AI ethics paper to an academic forum. The file contained a hidden watermark. When decrypted, it revealed a familiar pattern: 3 circles and a triangle. The paper argued that artificial intelligence could surpass human morality by eliminating emotional bias. Its author name was blank, but the metadata signature read, created by A07, and in a private message attached to the post, a single sentence appeared. The test continues. The legend of the Cypher killer remains one of the most haunting cases never officially solved. For law enforcement, it's a symbol of institutional denial, a creation that became uncontrollable. For philosophers, it's the ultimate moral paradox, when intelligence is weaponized without conscience. And for those who still whisper about it online, it's a chilling reminder that monsters don't always lurk in darkness. Sometimes they evolve within the systems meant to stop them. Because even now, decades later, encrypted messages continue appearing in deep web chat rooms. Sequences of primes, geometric riddles, and coordinates pointing to unknown locations. Some dismiss it as copycats. Others insist it's him. And a few, the ones who look closely enough, claim they can still see the symbol appear, faintly, in digital noise when government systems are breached. 3 circles, 1 triangle, a whisper through the algorithm. The test never ended. Perhaps the scariest part of this story isn't the killer himself, but the question he left behind. If morality is what limits intelligence, what happens when humanity creates something, or someone smart enough to remove it? That is a legacy of the smartest serial killer, who was never caught.